Clone Wars era of Star Wars is my favorite thing about the entire franchise. I love the comics, I love the books, I love both cartoons. They were honestly some of the very first science fiction I ever delved into as a child. And one piece of Star Wars lore that I love more than maybe anything else would have to be the history of the ARC Trooper program and the ARC Troopers themselves, which in my mind revolves around a concept that I would like to coin as trickle-down Jango Fett. You see, Jango Fett, the prime clone and template for the clone army, being a lifelong bounty hunter, saw how important special forces were to any military force. He proposed a group of clones that could fight on their own, who can handle missions normal clones could not. The first result of this was the Null class of ARC Trooper, which was originally comprised of 12 clones, but only 6 survived. These clones were stronger, bigger, and faster than other clone troopers. They were also incredibly unruly and defiant, and not willing to listen to orders, something the Kaminoans didn't like. And Kaminoan scientist Kosai made this very clear to Cal Skirata, one of the members of the Q Valdar, who I will talk about in a different video, along with Jango Fett, and said that they needed to be reconditioned, which resulted in Cal Skirata basically borderline nearly killing this Kaminoan scientist and saying, don't touch those kids. So, as a deal to prevent Cal Skirata from completely losing his marbles and Jango Fett wanting to maintain a decent business relationship, they decided to let Cal train the 6 remaining Null ARC Troopers, those becoming Ordo, Prudy, Comeric, Muriel, Jang, and Aiden. The next batch of ARC Troopers would be far more successful, being designated the Alpha Batch. These 100 clones would be personally trained by Jango Fett themselves, and were extremely well trained and versatile. Armed with enhanced weapons and armor, these 100 clones were one-man armies capable of taking out anything in their path, whether it was assault, stealth, or sabotage. Typically, they were armed with DC-15 blaster pistols, Westar M5 blaster rifles, or the DC-15A and S rifles, along with sniper rifles or rocket launchers, depending on the situation. And for those of you going, I don't know what an Alpha ARC Trooper is, you know this one clip that seems to be a bit of a meme now? Yeah, that's an Alpha ARC Trooper, and his name is Fordo, and he is literally the best. Initially, it was intended that they were going to be kept in cryosleep between missions, but after the Battle of Kamino, which debuted the Alpha Arcs in defending several cloning platforms, the Jedi saw how useful they were, and they were quickly integrated into the Grand Army of the Republic's command structure as Special Forces operators and command liaison to Jedi. And this is where the trickle-down Jango Fett effect comes in, because one ARC Trooper in particular, Alpha 17, would go on to be inspiration for Captain Rex as a character, by the way, started a program where he would train clone commanders to function more like ARC Troopers, along with having the individuality of thought and personality that ARCs had in spades. These commanders would become quite famous, as the graduates of this program would include characters like, Cody, Bly, Rex, Gree, Bakara, the main poster boys for clone commanders. Not only that, but other ARCs, including himself, would train various other generations of ARC Troopers, which is where we get arcs like Fives and Jesse and Colt, etc. This is what I mean by trickle-down Jango Fett. Every progressive class of clone trooper, whether directly or indirectly, is a distillation of Jango Fett's knowledge, skill, and personality. And there are extreme differences between the various types of clones, and this especially applies to the arcs. Alpha arcs tend to be by the book, but ruthless. They're very much so willing to argue with their Jedi partners if they think they have bad ideas, and will not mince words about it. They are very efficient, and they are very cold, and they will get the job done regardless of what needs to be done. During the Battle of Jabim, Alpha 17 went as far as to suggest that the clone army and the Jedi should just straight up kill all the surviving political leaders on the planet, and Obi-Wan obviously saying no to this. Alpha's response is, you're just gonna end up doing it eventually. He would also trash talk Jedi Padawans to their faces, and this includes Anakin Skywalker, and I find that extremely funny. Clone commanders have the individuality of thought, but they do not have the brashness and just stubbornness that Alpha arcs have. The best example of this I can think of is when Rex, even though given bad orders during the Battle of Umbara, went along with it up until a certain point. But every other step before that, he tried to be civil and diplomatic, where an Alpha arc just would not have been at all. Unless you're Commander Bakara, because he doesn't like anybody and nobody else likes him either. The ARC Troopers trained after the Alpha ARC batch are a bit of an in-between of the personalities and temperament that clone commanders and Alpha ARCs have. They understand their place in the chain of command better and are honestly the ideal, well-rounded ARC Troopers if you wanted to have them, say, be in a group of other clones instead of just being with ARCs. Going back to the Umbara example, where Rex didn't push Krell as hard, Fives was straight up hostile towards him and just would not care and wouldn't listen to him, him and would straight up get into arguments with him. And while that worked out well for them, it still took Krell having Fives almost killed for disobeying orders to get Rex to snap out of it. To me, this typifies the dynamic between clone commanders, ARC troopers, and then Alpha ARCs, but there's one more class that I have not gone into detail yet, and that's the null ARC troopers. Why is this? Well, they don't fit on this scale at all, because they are what Cal Scarata refers to as pure Django. We actually called the Alpha ARCs that, but in my opinion, the Alpha ARCs are not as pure Django as the Nulls are, because the Nulls are batshit insane. Why is this? Well, they just don't care. Because of how they were trained and raised, they would just not listen to you at all and punch you in the face if you said the wrong thing. They wouldn't punch Jedi in the face, but they would certainly mouth off to them. But if you were a clone that was just mouthing off to the Null ARCs, you were going to get hit in the face. And I have an actual example of this. The captain of the Null ARCs, Fordo, the poster child, and honestly one of the coolest out of all of them, needed to meet with a Jedi named Barden Jusik, and he was in a meeting, and not answering his space phone. Instead of waiting like a normal person, Fordo quite literally kicks the door in, grabs the Jedi, and says, "Hey, Cal Scarata needs you to look at something because there was an attack and it's on Coruscant and we need your help." The Alpha ARC trooper in the room named Maze tried to get in Ordo's face and tell him to respect the Jedi's time, blah, 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 and Fordo literally did not have any time for this and just flattened him and walked away. And because of the fact that Scarata protected them as children, they would listen to Scarata, and only Scarata, and those that Scarata respected. They literally respected Scarata so much that they referred to him as Papa Cal, and they took his surname after they fled to Mandalore after the Clone Wars ended. They were quite literally Scarata's private army, and that's not me saying that. That's a line out of the book. And it does, in fact, get weirder and wackier, because that's not the only time something like that has happened, because after the first Battle of Geonosis, they were again supposed to be, quote, reconditioned, and they didn't want that to happen reasonably, because the last time it happened, they were kids and they almost died. So they panicked, barricaded themselves inside of a clone garrison, resulting in them having an armed standoff with Jedi, 8 teams of clone commandos, and other clones and Coruscant security. General Iri Kamas, the head of the Republic Special Operations Brigade, requested Scarata personally to get them to relax and calm down. And the reason why the Republic put up with these 6 so much is because of the fact that they were so darn effective, they literally just left everything else as a pile of rubble. Hell, 2 of the Nulls, those being Jang and Comric, literally were the ones responsible for finding General Grievous, resulting in the Battle of Episode 3 happening. So, these guys were next level even compared to other ARC troopers. If you would like some reading and watching recommendations, I would recommend looking at the Clone Wars Republic comics from the mid-2000s, specifically the Jabim arc and the Battle of Commando arc, as well as this one about Gungans that I forget its name, but it's a pretty cool one that has Alpha 17 in it. Both Clone Wars shows, with the older show featuring Alpha arcs and the newer show not featuring Alpha arcs, but they're still really, really cool there. Some video games, new Battlefront 2 has them, old Battlefront 2 has them. There's also a bunch of mods for the old Battlefront 2 that add in a bunch of stuff. And the Republic Commando books. These are a wealth of knowledge on not only ARC troopers, but clone commandos and clone troopers as a whole. There are 5 of them. If you have the ability to read them, you should, because they are really, really, really good, and they are my favorite Star Wars novels of all time. There's also a guy on YouTube who's doing a audio drama read-through of the Republic Commando novels. The first book is completely done. The second book is a little part ways through, and this isn't like your standard audiobook. It's like an audio drama. It's something you'd buy on Audible quality. It's almost like to the level that the Black Library audio dramas are for some of the Warhammer books. It is top notch, and I would highly recommend seeking that out. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a great night.